Hello everyone. On behalf of Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, INTACH and the INTACH Conservation Institutes, I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, David Humphreys and Nancy O'Keefe, and everyone who has joined us for today's talk in the Conservation Insights 2020 lecture series. I'm Dr. Padma Rohila, Director ICI Delhi. Now to introduce our speaker, David Humphreys is the Director of Architectural Conservation Professionals, which has offices in Ireland and Singapore. He established the practice in 2000, and since that time has worked on over 680 projects for private clients, charitable organizations, government departments, and public authorities. He manages a team of over 15 specialist consultants covering all aspects of building conservation. He has over 30 years experience in both public service and private practice in Ireland, Canada, Australia, and the UK. David spent 8 years working as a senior professional officer with English Heritage and has extensive experience in managing large conservation projects. He has advised on projects in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Newfoundland, and Myanmar. David currently serves on the SCSI Conservation Group as Vice Chairperson and on the SCSI Project Management Group as Education Chairman. He's also got awards for the work, which include the European Architectural Heritage Award in 1993 for the work on Seacrove Castle in Bohemia, the Engineers Island Excellence Award for the Silronan Harbour Project, and the Engineer Project of the Year Award as part of Punch Consulting Project Team 2012 for Silronan Harbour. He's also got the Engineers Island Heritage and Conservation Excellence Award 2018 and the CABE Conservation International Award 2019 for the Aran Sweater Market Street project, which will be discussed today. I'd also like to introduce Nancy O'Keefe, who is a project architect on the Quay Street project. She has a BSc in Interior Architect and Registered Surveyor. She is the Historic Architectural Consultant, the project architect for the project. She has over 10 years experience in the refurbishment and adaptation of historic structures and buildings, experience gained in both Ireland and Australia. She manages projects through all stages, including inception, design, planning, tendering, and procurement of works on site. A particular area of interest is in the conservation of historic timber and its use as a construction material in historic roofs. The title for today's talk is Understanding the Challenges of Historic Buildings in Ireland, the case study Aran Sweater Market, Galway, Ireland. The presentation will set out the background to the legislative context of architectural conservation in the Irish Republic. The various challenges that have to be faced are also explored in this case study, and it will be used as an example of what can be achieved with the right approach and team. This project was awarded the Engineers Island Winner of Excellence Awards 2018 Heritage and Conservation and the CABE International Preservation and Conservation Award 2019, highly recommended. Before I invite David Humphreys and Nancy, may I please request all of you to mute your microphones. Please type in your questions in the chat box. We'll be taking those right at the end of the talk. And also type in your name, organization name, and email address. Now I request David to please start with the presentation. Thank you, David, so much for agreeing to doing this. I know you have a busy schedule. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Padma, thank you so much for inviting us. It's a real honor. And we just got a little bit mixed up on the time, and then of course the technology decided to play games with us, but we're up and running. So what I'd like to focus on today's talk is really speak about the historic buildings background we have in Ireland, and look then at a case study in Galway that we had the pleasure of working on, which is very, very interesting because it brings so many challenges together. And I think the message that will be coming across right from the very beginning is that having the right team of professionals is absolute key to the successful outcome of any project. So we'll start with going on with the slides. So I run the ACP group, where we've an office in Singapore, Ireland, and in St. John's in Newfoundland in Canada. I established the practice in 2000 after giving about 8 years with English Heritage, which was an extraordinary time. And I learned so much from some really, really skilled and amazing people that when I came back to Ireland in '98, I was just wanted to keep going with historic buildings. And unfortunately, there was no work in that line when I came back to Ireland. And from 2000 on, it slowly, because of a change in the legislation, that work started to come in. And my real wish at the time was to build a team of specialists, from archaeologists, timber experts, conservation engineers, conservation planners, ecologists, conservation architects, all of us working together, where we would understand how we all work together. We would almost like a family in a sense, and rather than trying to just focus on one aspect, I felt having a multidisciplinary team was really a real dream, and that's come into fruition for us. And we come across some amazing clients and some amazing buildings, and we're accredited by the RIBA, the RICS, and the SCSI in the UK and in Ireland. So our headquarters, as I said, is in Ireland. Our offices, Newfoundland and Singapore. And it's such an amazing challenge to be working, not just in Ireland, but to be working with different cultures, different, I'd say different people with different expectations, and bringing the expertise that we have, which is transferable, particularly when we're dealing with buildings that, masonry buildings that, in many cases in Southeast Asia, they're colonial buildings, and they're very familiar to us. So, you know, it's nothing, we're not, there's nothing unusual in that. Okay, the climate is different, the materials are different, but the approach tends to be very similar in terms of the building design and procurement. So the outline of the talk, I've given you a bit of background. We'll talk about the legislation context here in Ireland, the challenges that we face, which I suspect those challenges are almost universal. Nancy then will speak about the Quay Street project in Galway, which she was project conservation architect and project manager for the project. And I would say it was an amazing project that she brought into being with the help of others, but without her drive and commitment to it, that project might not have really come into being as well as it has. I will just briefly speak about the importance of teams and then the outcome of the project in Galway. The picture you're looking at there on the screen is what the Quay Street looked like when I first visited the site about 4 years ago. 2015. Nancy will tell me the date and the time that I was there. She just got a photographic memory on this stuff, which is very, very useful. But that building was held together with steel. It was an eyesore in the centre of one of the most tourist sites in Galway, which is a very tourist and historic town in the west of Ireland. And it had been probably like that for nearly 20 years. So the legislative context in Ireland, really, we have the National Monuments Acts dating back to the 1930s. And they cover any archaeological remains or up to about 1700. There seems to be a cut-off date. And those acts designate archaeological sites around the country, called recorded monuments, and there is a category of those called national monuments. And to deal with those, the legislation now requires that the archaeologist has to be licensed under the National Monument Act. Part 4 of the Planning Act 2000 was when, this is when the new Planning Act in 2000 recognised a new category of building called protected structures, which in the UK category, they would be called listed buildings. So for the first time, protected structures, listed buildings began to have proper protection in the country. Uniquely, we don't have a categorization of them. A building is protected or it isn't. Whereas in the UK, it had, you know, the 3 gradations. Here, we don't have that. And it has advantages and it has its disadvantages. Since 2000, then the Department of Culture decided to undertake an inventory of architectural heritage, NIAH, which is a survey of all of the historic buildings in the country, which really was the first time they made a proper inspection of all the historic buildings and started to categorize those into ones that would be added into the list of protected structures within the local authorities and ones that weren't. And they've categorized those into national importance, regional, and so on. So the information there is useful. It varies in its quality, but that's to be expected when you're doing a national survey. And then we have the archaeological survey that's continuously ongoing in the country, where like almost every parish in the country has got probably many various archaeological remains that, you know, almost go from Fullock Fields right through to maybe something else. So the various organizations that we get involved with and that are involved it certainly starred very well in Ireland, but it's a very ancient and sacred site just off the west coast of Ireland, and it's very isolated and difficult to get to. And sometimes the government departments, the local authorities, they can be isolated in a sense that they don't have the necessary resources that they require to do the job that they're given. And sometimes they just don't have the time then to you know, get fully involved in projects, and they're doing their very best. Even in some of the local authorities in the country, there are no conservation officers, and that presents its own difficulties. Under the planning legislation, we have a number of bodies called prescribed bodies, such as INTACH, Heritage Council, and so on. These bodies are consulted when a planning application is made for a protected structure. So if you are making a planning application, you're not just dealing with the local authority planner and the local authority conservation officer. All of that information is circulated to the Department of Arts, Culture and Heritage and Heritage Council and the other prescribed bodies. And they all have an opportunity to input into it. And so it can be very helpful. Where, you know, people with may know a little bit more of that particular type of building, and you know, they can be very helpful. We have local authorities and councils in the country. I guess it's 41 or 2 councils and local authorities in the country. Well, we will. Yeah. Anyway, but they all have their own different. They all have a similar structure, but the personalities you meet are always different. Some people really love the job and are, you know, really dedicated to the historic buildings, and they build up an expertise in their own area and maybe in a particular type of building. And in other places, it's someone that, you know, is just recently been promoted into the job, or there are some places where there's a heritage officer who's probably got a science background. He's asked to do building conservation as well, and you know, they're just trying to do their best with it. So once we build up relationships with these people, and you know, they begin to know what our expertise is, it certainly helps move projects along. And then you have the various professional bodies in the country, such as the Society of Chartered Surveyors, with their accredited system for building conservation surveyors. You have the Engineers Ireland, and you have the RIAI, the Architects Institute. And all of them have various levels of expertise within those organizations. But I would say that we don't have enough professional expertise at where we come in. But we also have a real lack of expertise in the country in terms of the quality of trades and skills. If we look at historic ironwork, there's probably 5 or 6 heritage blacksmiths in the whole country. And most of them are my age or maybe even older. And those skills are not being passed on. And that's kind of sad. Within the country, of course, we have, as I said, we have the various monuments. And they range from national monuments, like the picture on the left there is St. Nicholas's Church in Adair, dating back to the 14th century, was originally an Augustinian church. Changed hands a number of times over, and it's now, after major works in the early 1800s, it's now belonged to the Church of Ireland, and it's quite an amazing church. Like it's almost like you can go into that church and feel that you've gone back 500-600 years in time. On the right hand side would be at the top would be typical of what we have right around the country in graveyards. So there could be 1 or 2 of these in each parish, where you have the old church ruin in the graveyard, and it is completely falling apart with ivy and vegetation. And in many cases, they're just fenced off because they're dangerous. And it's, you know, it's quite sad to see this, but that's the reality of it. The funding and the interest isn't there. And many communities, local communities, do their best with limited resources, and you know, that's really what. So they'd be recorded monuments mostly, not nationally important. On the lower left, you have the Rocket Cashel, which again is managed by the OPW, but it's a national monument. It's a huge tourist site, and you know, it's got its own level of importance and huge history and variations. On the lower right hand side is Uppercourt Manor in County Kilkenny. It's varied over the years from, it was a bishop's palace, and it was a centre of ecclesiastical importance in Kilkenny and Ireland. And it is moved through various ownerships over the years, and it's now a small hotel. We've done some interesting work there on it over the years. And so, you know, the scale of these, you would have thousands of recorded monuments in the country, literally thousands. And the national monuments would be probably in, you know, I think the number is about 100 or something like that. Excuse me. Now, protected structures, they go on what's the RPS list, or the record of protected structures. And many people call them listed buildings. And if you know, when you're talking to someone and you said it's a protected structure, they're kind of wondering what you mean. But if you mention listed buildings, people seem to relate to it. And these can vary from buildings like the one up on the left, which is within, that's an old courtyard buildings within the curtilage of an 18th century building. And because they're within the curtilage, they're protected. On the right-hand side top, you have a absolutely amazing building in Limerick City called Baru House. And the quality, it was built at the late 19th century by quite a wealthy person who made his money supplying horses to the various armies during the wars of the 19th century and early 20th century. But the quality of the builds, the workmanship, the brick, the detailing is absolutely beautiful. And that building is, quite special within Limerick City context. On the lower left, we have what's now the Jesuit, was the Jesuit church in Limerick, and the O'Connell monument in front. And again, both are protected. And on the right-hand side lower would be typical of a protected building within the countryside, a large house, probably Georgian, maybe it was the rectory for the local rector, or is now owned by what we would call a strong farmer, which is an interesting name given to farmers in the country. And like most of these buildings struggle. They're all at a time in their life where they're probably 150 to 200 years since any funds were spent on them. And like the upkeep and maintenance of them is quite expensive. And the level of grant aid in Ireland is very, very small. Just the funding isn't there. So let's start looking at some of the challenges. I suppose one of the ones is people's perception, the perception of owners and perception of the public. And I picked these three particular photographs here because they represent something that if you travel through Ireland, you'll see all the time. In villages, you will see lovely, but where family homes with a shop or a public house or some sort of business. And many of these are no longer have an economic use, and they're just sitting there boarded up and in decay. And the perception is that, oh, it's terrible, and people start saying things like, oh, they should be made do them up and all of that. And of course, if there is no economics, no economic sense to it, it just doesn't happen. And if we take the top right-hand one, then you see all thatched buildings. The perception here, if this thatched building was, we'll say, in the UK, it would be pristine. It would be highly valued. Whereas in Ireland, that tends to be, in some people's minds, and I need to be quite careful on this because some people would see a thatched house as being something really special, and other people who probably more grew up in them or have family in them just found them a place that they wanted to get out of, and they abandoned the old thatched house because probably of the cost of maintenance and so on, and built a new house probably within the land holding. And the one on the bottom is again typical 19th century house, abandoned. And if someone is lucky enough to own it, and then they're facing all sorts of problems in terms of what might be wrong with it. And sometimes people just walk away because the impression out there is that, and it's not real in any sense, but it's real in some people's minds, is that people will say the authorities won't let me do anything to it. And sadly, that's an impression that's out there. Again, this particular building here, if we look on the center bottom, was a building that ran into some problems. It's protected. It ran into some problems because I think the people got the wrong advice. Initially, we got involved, and the owners at the time when they ran into the problems, they really didn't like the building. They thought, oh my God, we've made a mistake. But during that project, as that project came back online, the local authority, heritage officer and planners started to begin to support and help the project. We found during the archaeology that particular project in the living room of the house was the remains of the entrance gateway into the there was an old tower house, and the barn wall was gone, and the tower house almost gone, but the gable end of that building had the remains of the gateway of the barn wall. And as that building began to, almost in a sense, reveal itself to us as we worked on it, it became an amazing building. And as we you go around the house and around the yard, we'd start finding something like those old cobblestones scattered around the place in buildings. The owners of that building absolutely went from a point where they were really concerned to a point where that building, they love it. And it's now that building has a real future for probably the next 2 generations, because we got the owners to actually not just like the building, we got them to really start to love and appreciate and understand the importance of that building and the importance of the place that they have within that history of the building. So it's actually quite strange doing these Zoom calls because I can't see anyone and I can get no feedback, but it's an interesting experience. This is one where this is a personal belief of mine that the professional opinions often can be at odds on building. Building in Key Street sat there for probably 20 years. And there was an enforcement file probably that would fill, a very big table. And the building was just falling apart. But the owners and the planners and the enforcement people, they were all very busy, sending paperwork to each other and threatening each other with legal proceedings and all of that. But in the meantime, the building never was going nowhere. And I suppose key for us was to actually, from his point of view, we see the building as the client, not the person that owns the building. The building is our client. And we ask everyone then to support us in bringing that building back into economic use. And it works once people start to understand where we're taking the project. On the right-hand side is a building I pass probably once every week or two. On the top, about 10 years ago, I believe, it was in the state where the thatch was gone to a point where there was a lawn on top of it. And the owner attempted to get some work done on it, and he just ran into a block within the authorities. And he gave up. He walked away because whichever way he tried to go, he was just being led on a merry dance, I believe. Sadly, we weren't involved in the project because I think we might have been able to help. But today, when you pass that building, you can see what's left. There's just ruinous walls. And what could have been a beautiful family home, because of just being badly handled, is now left to a ruin. So I suppose the key thing in all of this conservation is the question of economics. I have 3 examples here, just put up. One on the lower left is a typical tower house in Ireland, and in Limerick and Tipperary we would have probably 1 per townsland in many cases of the parish. They are defensive. They were built as defences, and the vast majority of them are either like the one on the left, ivy covered, or there's a lot of structural damage where they were damaged and blown out after the Cromwellian Wars. And it's like they're a building that's very difficult to find any economic use for. Although we've worked on one that's the American owner decided to restore, and that project is progressing very well. The building on the centre top is Newcastle House up in Longford. Dates back. It's back to the earliest it dates back is to the 1600s. It's both a recorded monument and a protected structure. And the type of challenges that building, which is a small country hotel, is trying to deal with fire regulations and modern, regulations in terms of health and safety, running a hotel in terms of all of the requirements that are in terms of room sizes and means of escape and all of that. And that can be quite a challenge to bring into use. But in this case, that building continues to be used as a country hotel, and the owner is planning to put on quite a substantial extension onto it, which would be quite significant and it would add significantly to the economy, but also to the building. And the reason that building continues on is because it's actually paying its way. The building on the bottom is an old seminary building, which we have lots of them in Ireland. And many of them have no longer a use. Many of the seminaries are closed. And we also have lots of churches, both Church of Ireland and Roman Catholic churches that are struggling because their numbers are down. And what do you do with these buildings? It's a big challenge. This particular building, it's in Thurles. It was bought by Mary I Immaculate College, part of the University of Limerick. And we were involved in converting the dormitory structure, the single rooms with a bed and a kind of a sink, and upgrading those into ensuite rooms, so that the building could be used as a postgraduate residential centre, and that's why that building now has a new life. And again, the challenges of disability access, fire, and so on all come into play. But I think the key to it is if you can find an economic use for a building, then it's got a good future. Now, the next bit I just want to mention is this whole area of culture. In Ireland, we're always talking about a culture. We speak about Irish music, traditional music, and it's got a great interest. Our traditional games, our traditional dance, and some of our traditional crafts, many of which are dying out. But we don't seem to see our buildings as part or in the same light as part of our culture. Or if we do, I don't think we give it as much weight as the other parts of our culture. And that has a certain sadness for me, but that's just my particular interest. And of course, one of the areas that I'm particularly interested in is the conservation of historic armour. And I use the word disappearing before our eyes because almost everywhere if you walk any of the roads in Limerick or any county in Ireland, you're not very far from some form of old iron gate or railing. It was probably made by a local blacksmith. If you go in around Limerick City, there's lots and lots of historic ironwork in the railings and all the different periods you can identify. And people don't seem to value it. Even the trade of a heritage blacksmith is not valued as much as I believe it should. And this part of our heritage is slowly but surely disappearing because it's not valued. And even when it is valued, it's difficult to get the right craftsmen to do the job. And we've come across projects where the wrong approach was taken. And as an example here, just that photograph that came up. It's an important gateway in a city near us here in the Midwest region. I went to visit the building, and the project manager of the site was all excited to tell me they had restored the gates. And I had found an old photograph, so I was really looking forward to seeing what they'd done. And the closer as we walked towards the gates, I began to realize there's something really wrong here. And getting up near, I realized that none of the original gate or railings were there. They were gone off to the scrap merchants, and there was a whole new setup put in place. And I knew by the photographs that I had that the condition of it and the knowledge I have of historic ironwork, that there was very little wrong. And you can just see on the top of that slide the stub of the original hanger for the gates. And then they put on a plate with a piece of threaded bar to hold a welded together piece of mild steel gate that's supposed to be a historic gate. I was horrified. Other areas that we find where there's inappropriate repairs is the wrong use of cementitious pointing, which tended to be very popular here in the 70s. And even we've had buildings that we've been advising on where the owners would have been advised back in the 70s and 80s and 90s even to strip off the old plaster because it's it's failing, and put on a new ordinary Portland cement render. And this particular building in the top, which is a beautiful former Bishop's Palace, that building now, if you get close to it, you begin to see that the OPC render is cracking. There's dampness in that building that was never there. And ultimately down the road, the owners will have to strip off all of that OPC render and re-render it in hydraulic lime based render and get the building to actually work properly again. The lower right hand side photograph is the stairs, beautiful historic stairs in a former Bishop's Palace as well. It had repairs done to it, but the repairs were so badly done that the stairs became unsafe. And 2 years ago, we had to take out all of the former repairs, so-called repairs, and repair the staircase properly, both from a structural point of view and from a historic point of view, in that some of the repairs that were previously done weren't done properly, with the wrong type of spindles and so on. So the word inappropriate repairs really is a big challenge. So we have the technical challenges. I won't stay too long on these. We have the challenge. And I think one of the big ones that's now beginning to rear its head is this drive towards NZEB, near zero energy buildings. And that's fine, probably maybe fine in new buildings, but trying to introduce any of the technologies and the materials that go along with that into all the buildings is certainly creating very big challenges. We have the lack of expertise. at all levels, both in terms of craft, in terms of professionals, and in terms of the expertise within the authorities. We have all the fire engineering challenges and the disability access challenges as well. So these are technical. They can be overcome, but depending on the building, certainly we would have to take certain innovative approaches to the buildings. So now, Quay Street, Galway. I will sit back and I'll hand you over to Nancy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Hi everyone, my name is Nancy O'Keefe and I will talk to you today about Quay Street in Galway. I suppose the first time I was on the site was in May 2016, and literally the photos that you're looking at now is what I actually arrived to on site. So the I think the mouse, you can see the mouse moving as well. This building over here was completely stabilized with reinforcement steel. As you can see, it was being held together because the local authorities thought it was going to fall. Internally, all the walls had been taken out. There was nothing left. There's no roof. As you can see, there's no windows. There is a concrete floor in sections, but there was nothing permanent. And we were very fortunate that we had a fantastic client who purchased the property. He purchased it looking like this, and he had a vision, and he wanted to convert it into an anchor store for his company, Aran Sweaters, the Aran Sweater Market. And it was a key location for him because the Aran Sweaters come from an island just off the coast of where this building is located, and he thought for him it was extremely important. And his enthusiasm and his drive and his want to do this was half the battle. There was no convincing him. He saw the vision, he had the vision, and we just helped him achieve it. Thanks, Sue. So our first challenge was then to get it through planning. So we spoke with the local authorities, we spoke with the departments from the national departments, and we got them on board, and we got planning permission and started planning with constructing within a year. Now some things like the windows were redesigned during the construction when we found more archaeological evidence, but it was a working process throughout the whole process. We was working together as a team, and it wasn't just us here in ACP. There was way more people involved. Now, for it to work, one of the first things we decided was, because the walls were so bad, and we couldn't be certain on the structural stability of it, we decided that we were going to put a frame internally inside the building that would actually hold the new building and the new roof structure, so that none of the roof structure was actually going down on the original walls, but it would have to tie back in. So the center image here, you can see are one of our drawings. You can see where the new columns were going in, and they in turn would actually connect it to the original wall, and they tied it back in, so everything stayed together. It was a long process. It was done, every pod, every column where you can see here, they all had to be monitored by an archaeologist while they were being excavated, because it's such a long process. The columns had to go in for the floor to go in, so that the steel rakers could come off, so that the archaeologists could go in back into the ground floor to do the whole excavation. So there was so many different layers and so many different factors going on. So everyone really had to work together. But for us, I think the key thing was making the sections of the building be unique to themselves. So the front of the building was a medieval structure, and then 2 to 5 was a 19th century, 19th century structure. So throughout the whole design, every period of construction was, every design was done for that its period. So within the 19th century buildings, we had what you have here is a king post truss, because the king post truss is the last, it was the end of the evolution of the timber trusses. And then over here in the medieval section, we have a medieval style timber roof truss. So that again, it would, when you were inside the building, the elements reflected the period of time. And that was one of the things that we were keen on doing, and the client was so enthusiastic that it happened. And it wasn't even just the roof structure, it was also the windows, the doors, everything had to tie back into its period of time. So when we were in the middle of doing the excavation of the ground floor, our archaeologist rang us on the 9th of January 2018, and I was like, I'm after finding something. And we were like, oh great, he's after finding bones. That's what I thought straight away. And he goes, no, we're after finding the original castle of Galway. For Galway was it was established in 1300s, so a long time ago, but they never actually knew where the original castle was. They knew where it could have been. They had ideas, but they actually had never found the exact location. In Ireland, one of the items in relation to the archaeology is you're not allowed to just start digging the ground to look for something. You have to have a reason. Obviously, they had a reason to do the excavations here, and because of that, they actually found the original Castle of Galway. Now, we knew that there was going to be something on the ground. We thought it would be a medieval wall because we knew it had been taken down. And during the concept design and the planning permission, we had asked for a glass structure to be put down to illuminate what the past. And obviously, with the original castle being found, that was more important than just, it predated the medieval wall, and it was more important. So we end up moving it. And as you can see over here in this corner, that is the shop currently. And there is the original Castle of Galway actually illuminated for everyone who enters to see. And you don't actually have to even enter because this is the main door, and everyone that walks by always sees it. And it is a striking point, and certainly not something everybody has in their store. But the outcomes, I suppose, there's the obvious one that we took to a ruined building and turned it into a shop, but that's not really what happened here. For a lot of people in the city, we converted the building, we brought back magic, we brought back kids' imaginations, adults' imaginations. Everyone just thought, wow, like somebody took it on, somebody did it, and it got done. Which it was the biggest eyesore in the city, and it's a very busy street, and everyone had given up hope, and now there's a sense of pride to it, and that was because of the team and the owner, and without them together, really, it would never have happened. So these are just what it kind of looks like. There's obviously the entrance now, and this is your view from inside. There's a carriage. You can see it down here at the side of the building. That was a carriage arch. So we've just made it into a display window, and you look out straight into the River Corrib, which leads into the Irish Sea. Well, actually, sorry, no, it leads into the Atlantic. Apologies. And then obviously up here in the top, you can see our 19th century, a view of the 19th century buildings with all the roof structure and how it's fitted out. There's a couple more images. This door here is quite interesting because this section of it this section was actually there all along. Oh, apologies, I might have gone past it. Oh, anyway, though the former image, that section of the medieval art was still there, and we had to go back and replicate it. So you can literally see there's a notch here. That's not a shadow. That's actually a notch in stone, and it is there now because it was existing, and the rest of it is brand new. all this section of the stone surround is brand new, but the rest of it is original. So our stonemasons had to do a template and produce it like for like, match it exactly. There's the flat arch window that I was speaking about. Back to the windows, we have sliding sash windows in the 19th century. Again, being matching the period of time, so that everything externally and internally looked like it should be there. It's not something new. Like, it will weather and it will look as if it was always there. Ironically, the funny thing is, if you're looking at this photo, these two chimneys here are fake. They have no purpose. They do nothing. They're actually just a solid they're a solid structure up on the roof, because our historic photos showed chimney stacks here and here up on the roof, and obviously we didn't have any walls internally, so we felt it best to put them back in to represent the past. But obviously inside they're non-functioning, and surprisingly we've actually done it a few more times since, and since to really allow a building to identify the different sections, like number 2, number 3, number 4. It helps to identify the structure. And so our project team, obviously ACP, we did the architectural conservation, the engineering. We ran it from the design stage, concept stage, all the way to the end. But it wasn't just us. We had Tobin's Engineering from Galway. We had I'm trying to think here now. Looking at Sean Dewan was the builder, which without him, now to be fair, it wouldn't have been done. We had Jeremy Walt. He came in as the client's representative to make sure things kept going, and he had a job doing that. It wasn't a one-man job. Was what I'm trying to say. As you can see, there is a team of us there, and we all worked together. We all had a vision, and that was led by the client, and his dream became a reality. And it was because he was so willing to let us go with it, and he said, yeah, off you go, give me the keys and I'll be back. That was it. He was the key, and then everything else fell into place. And it was an absolute joy of a project to be on, and genuinely one of a kind. I think the next image is, I think this is the end, but there we do have a little slideshow, so you can actually see start to finish. So that's what we arrived at, and the rest of the images will take you through. Thank you. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, David. I think it was an excellent presentation. Unbelievable transformation. Any questions? I don't see many questions. I have, personally, I have one question. The fact that the archaeology survey did reveal a part of the fort, the original Galway, the wall that was revealed. That didn't that was not an issue with the building then, the fact that there was an evidence of something there. Was there a conflict with the archaeological department? The fact that in the foundation there were remains?
No, not at all. So if I can go back, what I might do is I might actually go back to the plan, because you can see where I put the mouse, can't you? Can you see where I put the mouse on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if you see this is the ground floor plan of the building, and the wall was actually here and going that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
So we obviously can't do anything. This wall was staying. That's a medieval wall. That wasn't going anywhere. and we know the castle wall goes under it and into the street, but we don't own that. And as I said during talk, you're not allowed under the department, under our guidelines, you're not allowed to. You can't dig up the ground for the fun of it. You can't go looking for something if you don't know it's going to be there. That's the word. So the archaeologists literally excavated it, recorded everything, and literally walked away, because that's all they can do. They can only record it. Now, left everything there, bar the section that we left exposed. We channeled that out so that it wouldn't get destroyed, but everything else is actually secured under the ground. So if someone decides to rip up the concrete floor, they have it again. Now, the funny thing about as much that we found the wall, it wasn't the only thing we found. If I pull up, I'm just making this a little bit bigger. The stairs here, from where I'm drawing the line here with the marks, that is actually the original shoreline of Galway, because we could see all the shells, oyster shells, and then the medieval wall returns here, and all around here is medieval cobblestones, and that's still all underneath the ground. We didn't take it out; it's still all there.
Okay.
So I think, does that answer that for you?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. There is a question. Thank you for the talk. Very interesting. I was wondering if there is now any display information in the shop explaining about the wall of Galway, or also was there a delay created by finding the wall, or was it expected? I mean, I think that part is
okay.
Is there any display information at the shop?
It was expected. Yeah. So the wall was expected because we thought there was something there. So it actually didn't delay anything at all, and the council moved very, very fast. So from changing things like that, there was no delay. Galway themselves, City Council, do want to erect a plaque on the building to identify that the original wall of Galway is underneath the foundations or underneath the building. But the client loves it, having it there and it being part of his structure, that he actually has pamphlets done out so that anyone that comes into the store gets a pamphlet of the history and the archaeology, and they get to take it away. So he's doing his own bit, and then the local authorities want to, once they get it done, they'll put up a plaque on the wall, so it is recorded forevermore.
I think these questions are important because in many countries, including ours, the moment you find something of archaeological thing, so I mean the Archaeological Survey of India would jump in, and then a lot of restrictions and a lot of delays, as one would say. So I think that's why this question was asked. I think it's very...
No, it's a very valid question, and we have been on sites before where we found archaeology and it has delayed everything. But luckily for that, it was actually a local authority project, so they didn't mind the delays. It wasn't a private client. But given the nature of this site and its location, we tend to make the assumption and factor in a couple of weeks there into the program that you can play around with. You know, a client is never going to give out to you if you finish a project fast, but they'll start giving out if you finish it late. So if you add on a couple of weeks, you can always take it off if you need, and that's what we tend to do with projects like these ones.
I think a very, very beautiful outcome. It's
Thank you.
I must say, and again, the building has been used. That's what everybody is saying. A very good example of adaptive usage, a very busy place now. So thank you very much. We don't have many questions today. I'm really sorry about the time mix-up. I thought I had to remind you, and then we have the technical issues. Thank you so much. Thank you, David, for taking out the time. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
You're more than welcome. We're a pleasure. It was our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Padma.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.